Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a 1962 Philippines Supreme Court tax dispute and turning it into a giant legal puzzle about the very nature of property. You probably think you intuitively know the difference between, say, a permanent brick building and a handheld power tool, right? But the law, well, it has a way of blurring those lines in ways you literally would never expect. We're going to dive into how legal definitions can actually change the physical category of the everyday objects around us. Let's kick things off with a question that honestly sounds a little absurd. Can a completely movable machine, like your standard everyday battery charger, magically transform into real estate? Hold on to that thought, because the answer hinges on a concept that completely defies common sense, and it's the exact question that set off a massive legal battle decades ago. To figure this out, we're looking at a real ruling from the Philippine Supreme Court, where they had to step in and solve this massive tax mystery back in 1962. This specific legal battle ended up defining exactly what makes a piece of property movable or permanently immovable in the eyes of the government. The 4,400 peso tax dispute. Let's introduce the main players in our legal drama here. On one side, we've got the Mindanao Bus Company. They're a public utility, and their sole business is transporting passengers and cargo using motor trucks across the island of Mindanao. And on the other side, we have the city assessor of Cagayan de Oro City who decided to peek inside the bus company's repair shop and slap a very specific and highly controversial tax on their equipment. The exact tax assessment was 4,400 pesos. Now, back in the early 60s, that was a huge sum of money. The assessor basically walked into the Mindanao Bus Company's repair shop, pointed at the machinery sitting there, and handed them a massive bill, claiming those machines were subject to a real estate tax. And as you might guess, the bus company immediately appealed this. So, imagine you're the judge in this scenario. You've got the city assessor pointing at the machines declaring these machines are taxable realty. But then the Mindanao Bus Company fires right back saying, absolutely not. These are movables. They're just sitting on platforms. We can literally pick them up and move them around the shop. Just to put this in perspective, let's look at exactly what the bus company was being taxed on. We're talking about a Hobart electric welder, a storm boring machine, a lathe machine with a motor. Toss in a Black & Decker grinder, a Pemco hydraulic press, a battery charger, and a D-engine Waukesha. Seriously, think about these tools for a second. They're totally mundane, everyday items. And physically, they are incredibly, obviously movable. The rule of immobilization. So how on earth could a tax assessor look at a portable grinder and somehow see a brick-and-mortar building? Well, to crack this puzzle, we have to look at a specific legal doctrine. It's called being immobilized by destination, and it's basically a legal magic trick. This doctrine says that movable items can actually be converted into real property, into real estate, based entirely on their permanent and essential purpose within an industry. It's a wildly fascinating concept. It shows how an abstract legal definition can just overwrite the physical reality of an object. Basically, if a tool is deemed essential enough to a business, the law treats it as if it were a permanent physical building. The key to all of this is tucked right here in Article 415, Paragraph 5 of the Philippine Civil Code. It says, immovable property includes machinery intended by the owner for an industry which may be carried on in a building or on a piece of land, and which tend directly to meet the needs of the said industry. Pay really close attention to that last part. The machines have to directly meet the industry's needs. Essential versus incidental. This brings us right to the critical distinction the Supreme Court had to make. We're going to walk through some of the court's brilliant analogies to sort out what makes a machine legally essential to an industry, and therefore real estate, versus what makes it merely incidental. Let's take a sugar central, or a sugar mill, for example. The massive, heavy machinery that physically crushes the sugarcane, that's essential. Without it, the sugar mill literally cannot function. It can't carry out its industrial purpose. So that machinery is legally real estate. Now contrast that with a hotel's cash registers. Sure, a hotel uses them, but they're merely incidental. A hotel can absolutely still rent you a bed and function as a hotel without a cash register, even if checking out takes a little longer. So the register stays a movable object. The court took this a step further with a brewery analogy. The machines used to actually manufacture the liquor and soft drinks? Essential. Because they're essential, they are immobilized by destination. Boom, they're real estate. But what about the brewery's delivery trucks or the adding machines in their office? Those are incidental. They facilitate the business, for sure, but they don't define the core industry of brewing itself. Therefore, they remain movables. All right, based on those clues and analogies, what do you think? Put yourself in the shoes of the court for the Mindanao Bus Company. Are their repair machines, the battery charger, the welder, the grinder, essential to the business of transportation, or are they incidental? Keep in mind, their authorized primary business is transporting passengers and cargo. The Supreme Court decides. Let's see exactly how they settled this. The court laid out a really clear two-part reasoning. First off, they determined the machines are merely incidental. Why? Because the business of transportation can absolutely run without a dedicated owned repair shop. The bus company's main job is moving people. They bought these tools for expediency just to make servicing their fleet easier, but they could easily just outsource their repairs to a third-party shop. Second, remember, the law says the industry must be carried on in a building or on a piece of land. The transportation business isn't permanently anchored to a specific building. The whole point is that it happens out on the open road. So the Supreme Court completely sided with the bus company. Because the equipment wasn't absolutely essential to the act of transportation itself, the tools retained their movable nature. The whole tax assessment was thrown out, and the bus company was saved from paying a real estate tax on their everyday power tools. Why legal definitions matter? You might be wondering, why does a tax case from 1962 matter to us today? Well, it perfectly illustrates the sheer power of legal definitions. These seemingly invisible legal boundaries completely shape the taxes we pay, the way businesses operate, and how assets are classified all over the globe. A single word, like essential versus incidental, can literally be the difference between a crippling tax bill and paying nothing at all. So I'll leave you with this. If a tax assessor walked into your workplace today, armed with the rule of immobilization by destination, which of your everyday tools would secretly be considered real estate? It kind of makes you look at your own environment entirely differently, doesn't it? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the reality of the objects around you.